Hello guys, how are you doing? I hope you are doing very well. Today we're gonna talk about floating and sinking. So let's see how things are going to sink or how will they float. So let's see. Bismillah. When an object on water, there are two forces act on it. Okay, for example, when you see this thing or in here the diagram, when you see that something inside the water or on the water, two forces are gonna act on this object. It's not only balls, any other objects. What are they? The weight due to its force, which is gravity. It means the gravity that is going to pull it down to the earth, and also upthrust. Upthrust is like a kind of force of water that push things up. It's here. Upthrust is a force that caused by water that pushed objects up. When you put anything, even the one that it's going to sink, it has upthrust on it. I mean, there's a force that push this up, which is called upthrust. So in here you have to know that any object in the water, on the water, whatever you say, has two forces. These are the forces, the name of the forces. You can say gravity and upthrust. So upthrust is what we said, that there's a force that, by water, that push things up. It's because of the water. I mean, upthrust is going to, this one is going to float, or that one, because of the upthrust. Amount of upthrust is more, that's why it's gonna float. So guys, we have a rule for something which is going to float or sink. We must follow this rule. If the mass of the object is less or equal to the mass of displaced water, this is important, guys. The mass of displaced water, the object will float if it is less or equal to the displaced water. But if the mass of the object, it means if the ball or any other object like this shape, any other object, if the mass of the object is greater than the mass of the displaced water, the object will sink. So actually this is very easy. The only thing that you have to understand, what is displaced water, that's directly you will understand the topic. If you look at this part, you see that when you put the object in the water or any other liquid is here, so you see some of the liquid will goes out from the tube. Okay, you see it. What is this? If you look at this part here, you see it, some will pour out. So this is called displaced water, the amount of water that the object will replace it. You see, the amount of the water that object will replace it. We will understand this. If the size of the object is bigger, the displaced water will be more, because it takes more, it replaces more water. So that's it. The amount of the water that the object is gonna replace it, we call this displaced water. When they put the object, of course the liquid will pour out, right? It's gonna pour down in the tube in here. So it means displaced water is this water that the object will replace it. So, and also you have to measure this displaced water. If amount of this displaced water that is gonna be replaced, if it is equal or less than the object, this object you see that is inside the liquid, if it's less or equal the mass of this in kilogram, if it's less or equal to the object, the mass of the object, so the object will float. But if this displaced water is less than the object, it means the object is the mass of the object is greater than this displaced water, so in this situation the object will sink, because the object is heavier. If the object is heavier, it's gonna than the displaced water, it's gonna sink. If the object is less or equal, it means lighter than the displaced water, so in this case the object will float. So the only thing is this displaced water. You have to compare the mass of the object and the mass of the displaced water. If the object is equal or less than the water, the displaced water I mean, so it's gonna float. If the object is greater than the displaced water, so it's gonna sink. That's it. Two things are going to affect on sinking and floating, guys: the mass and the shape of an object, okay, have effect on sinking and floating. Be careful, these two are important. The mass I just told you, because if the mass is greater it's gonna sink, if it's less or equal it's gonna float, right? But what about shape? If you see the ship is not gonna sink, right? Why is it floating? Because of its shape, because there are it's hollow inside it. That it means there's the size is big but the mass is less, I mean less compared to its size. So they make many holes inside, it's hollow, it means the inside is empty, so that's why it's not gonna be heavy. So we said the size of the object is gonna decide about the displaced water. If the size of the object is big, the displaced water is more. So in this case, the displaced water will be more. It means the object will be less, right? It's gonna be lighter. The displaced water will be heavier. We said if the object is less or equal, it's gonna float. So because inside this is not full of, I mean, metals or something, it's hollow inside it. It's because of this hollow inside. I mean, the hollow object is it's going to be, I mean, like the what do you call, the size is gonna be big. So if the size is big, the displaced water will be more, and in this case it's gonna be I mean the mass of this is gonna be less than the displaced water. In this situation, if it's less or equal, it's gonna float. So it means designing something is important. The shape is important. The mass and the shape of an object have an effect on sinking and floating. So these are things about the floating and sinking. That's how you know if something sink or float. You have to know that there are two forces act on them, which is gravity and upthrust. Gravity is always for down, upthrust is always for up. It means push things up. You see that the gravity in here is longer. Why? Because the object sinked, right? So when it's sinking, it means the gravity is more than the upthrust. That's why it's sinking. If it's equal like this, it's not gonna sink, it's gonna float, right? You see. And if the mass of the object is less or equal to the displaced water, we said what the displaced water is, so it's gonna float if it is less or equal. But if the mass of the object is greater than the displaced water, I mean the mass of the displaced water, so the object will sink. If it is greater, it must be here, like here. This one is gonna sink, the small one. Why? Because the size is less and it's full inside it. It's not empty. There is not, maybe it doesn't have air inside it. It's not hollow. So the size is less. The amount of displaced water is less because the size is small. So when we said that when the size is small, the displaced water is less. The size is big, the displaced water will be more. So because the size is small, the displaced water is less. So it means the mass of the displaced water will be less than it. It's gonna be heavier than the displaced water. It's gonna sink. But in here, you see that the other ball is like larger and it's hollow, it's empty inside it. Only the size is more. When the size is more, the displaced water will be more. In this case, the object will be here lighter than the displaced water. We said that if the object, the mass of the object is less or equal to the displaced water, it's gonna float. Because it's less than the displaced water, it's gonna float. That's it. And also you have to know that it's not only mass which is effect on the sinking and floating. The shape is also important. The mass of this ship is it's more, it's right, it's like it's heavier actually. But because of the shape make it big, I mean make the shape bigger, so the displaced water will be more. When it's gonna be more, the amount of displaced water, the mass of the displaced water will be more. If the mass of the displaced water will be more, in this case the object will float. That's all about displaced water and I mean sinking and flowing. The displaced water is important for sinking and flowing. There, that's really important. And also about diagram. If you talk about this like forces, not displaced water, if they are the forces are equal, it's gonna float. But if the gravity is more, you see the arrow is longer. Longer means it's more. It's shorter means upthrust is less. That's why it's the another one. I mean the right side is has been synced. So that's all. I hope you understand and best wishes.